Welcome to the Emergent Studio. Here with me today are Adrian Carter, Lars Botin and Nikolaj Steino of Aalborg University in Denmark. We will be discussing the exchange programme between both Portsmouth and Aalborg universities and having a debate about the architectural realm and where they sit within it. Let me introduce the first of our guests, Adrian Carter. A British-born architect who studied at Portsmouth School of Architecture, he has extensive Nordic and international experience and is now an academic at Aalborg University and research director of the Utzon Centre in Aalborg. He is also Honorary Associate Professor at the Faculty of Architecture in Sydney and has acted as an advisor to the Australian Government Department for the Environmental Heritage of the Sydney Opera House. Secondly, we have with us today Lars Botin, Assistant Professor at Aalborg University, where he teaches philosophy of science, architecture and art history. He has researched the realm of technology extensively, particularly from the ethical and phenomenological standpoints. Today, he is involved in the coordination and development of the art and technology programs at Aalborg University. And last but not least, we have Nikolaj Steino, Associate Professor and head of the Architecture and Design program at Aalborg University. Nikolaj has travelled and worked extensively, including spells as visiting scholar at both Columbia University in New York and the Middle East Technical University in Turkey. His current research lies in the fields of form-making, urban design and philosophy. Okay, I'm just going to start with a question for you, Adrian. How do you feel that the exchange programme with the Portsmouth School of Architecture has gone so far, and how would you measure its success?
Well, I think it's been quite successful so far in terms of the interaction between students from Portsmouth and our own students in Denmark. Certainly your visit to Aalborg recently activated our students and got them very involved in their project very quickly, because there was a very short period of time where we were working together. So I think that had great benefits, in terms of really creating a dynamic and introducing other perspectives, other ideas that open us to think about the project in different ways. So,
I know that we've definitely felt that the experience of the exchange programme has helped us in our own design processes, and just glad to hear that it's the same for them as well. Do you think there's anything in particular that's benefited the students in their approach at all?
Well, I think it introduced different perspectives on ways of working, so that we have a way of working in groups, which is unusual, and I think that was an interesting opportunity for students from Portsmouth to experience that. It probably would be difficult to introduce the same principle here, because the principle of working individually is much more ingrained. But I think the openness to see that as a possibility, I think was useful for both. At the same time, the students from Portsmouth brought their perspectives, their way of working with projects and philosophical dimension to it that I think was important, and also that because you coming from outside, it gave another external view on what we were doing locally.
Oh, great. I just got a quick question for Nikolaj. That's okay, thank you. You have collaborated on projects with universities in Thailand, as well as others around the world. Do you see further collaboration opportunities for Aalborg and the School of Architecture?
Well, absolutely. I mean, we live in an internationalized world where exchange of ideas, not just within each our different parts of the world, but also between different parts of the world, is increasingly important. I mean, academia and higher education and research is above all about the sharing of ideas for the mutual benefit of researchers as well as students. And I think it is not just an opportunity, but it's an obligation for an institution of higher education these days to seek international collaboration as much as possible.
It's interesting, an obligation to widen the experience and really create international links.
Well, absolutely, because as you probably learned from your own experience, I mean, there's always a slightly different take on things whenever you go somewhere else, and that sort of broadens your horizon. I mean, the world-famous Danish author Hans Christian Andersen said, to travel is to live. And I think that's essentially what also to study and to do research is about, is to exchange ideas, whether you travel, actually move from one place to another, or whether you exchange ideas across borders.
Oh, excellent. Bridging borders through knowledge and information. It's definitely something relevant to today. Lars, I was wondering, the Utzon Centre in Aalborg recently hosted the International Conference Architecture and Stages in the Experience City. How would you envisage a city of the future?
Wow, that's a big question.
Possibly related.
And I don't know if I'm able to. Well, the city of the future. I think that when we look at the city and how we think infrastructure and how we think monuments of the cities made by architects of fame, then a change is becoming, so to say. And I think that change is becoming from necessity, so to say, from the outer world, or from the world as such, or at least us as beings in the world, due to the changes that we have provoked on this world. And talks are going on in Copenhagen, in Denmark, right now, of how we're going to meet those changes. And I think that one place that these changes in our approach to how to interact with the world as a given thing will show in the city. And I think the city as such is an ideal place for that showing, because we tend to gather in cities and tend to gather to knowledge, to create knowledge, to reflect in that space as the city is.
So the city is a melting pot.
I said to you, it's a big question, and that's where I see the potentials of the city as becoming a sort of learning lab for the future human being, in order for him, her to become in a reasonable relationship with this world that is our, so to say, given place that we can't really escape.
You mentioned about our world, and it is our place. And you talk about the the proliferation of these iconic architectures. Yet they somehow ignore the more human condition within us. I mean, personally, I think that. And do you think maybe there's a way of, or maybe there's a stream of consciousness available now that is trying to bring back the more human-orientated aspects into architecture, and possibly through phenomenology or phenomenological approach, and through, as well, the international sort of exchange of ideas?
I think the sensible ones, the reasonable ones, so to say, will take on that vestige, or so to say, take on that role and become iconic on that behalf, and not iconic in the sense that we've seen throughout modernity. We can almost talk about creating these monumental, iconic towers and office buildings and what we ever see around the world. It's another kind of iconic status that the sensible and reasonable architect will strive for, in order to meet the requirements of humanity and of this world in which we live.
So an iconic architecture of humanity. Great.
Yeah.
Okay, I'll just go to you, Adrian. But actually, it's a question for all three of you, really. Just wondering, between the three of you, it seems like you have virtually covered most of the globe. I was just wondering what meeting points you maybe see between the Nordic and the Danish context and culture, and between other cultures, and perhaps how do you see the different cultures that you've experienced affecting the Danish